It is indeed an honor and a privilege to be here. I've tried to present many times here and I finally got selected, so it's looking up. And I appreciate you all coming out today to have a dialogue around dealing with data pack rats. How do we think about reducing our risk by controlling the data footprints? How do we manage this? We have become incredible data hoarders because we're all under the guise that storage is cheap, information is abundant. Well, there are requirements for keeping information. There are certainly business drivers for doing so. And at the same time, the more information we keep, the potential risks go up. For those of you who have not downloaded the slides, I'd highly recommend you do that. There's a lot of information in this deck that is really there for your reference going forward. There's going to be some content I move through a little bit quickly. Just it's there to help set a little bit of the context around what we're doing and what to think about. And there's going to be some times where I'm going to spend a little bit more details on more of the functional aspects. How do you think about controlling this? What are the things to think about from a data disposition perspective? What are the information systems we have to look at blocking and protecting? And what are some of the approaches for doing so? So from an agenda perspective, I want to start off with what are the objectives? What do you want to take away from this? Second aspect then is let's start to talk about what are the footprints you have to think about. And that's not a typographical error. There are multiple footprints as we go through this. And we'll set some context around that. Next, we'll start talking about the business and regulatory drivers. Why do organizations need to keep information? There's a lot of valid reasons. There's a lot of things we use information for in order to make decisions. The more information we collect, though, our risks go up. And we'll talk about that. What are the operational risks? What are some of the cybersecurity risks? What are some of the legal risks? From there, we'll take a look at creating a plan to start to dispose of information. How do you think about this? How do you engage with your business owners, your data owners, and have a dialogue? Some of us are cybersecurity professionals, some of us might be data owners, some of us might be compliance and legal. It's a cohesive, collaborative conversation to start to think about how do we protect this information, what's important, and how do we think about determining what we keep, what we get rid of, what do we anonymize. We'll look at then creating a plan to dispose of it, and getting into the aspects of how do we reduce it. How do we think about reducing the information we collect? How do we think about reducing the information repositories we keep it in? And how do we think about ultimately getting rid of it and destroying it? From there, we'll wrap up, have any questions you have come forward, and enjoy the dialogue. So let's dive into this. What are learning objectives? First part of this is to start to identify what are the types of information we collect. What does that look like? Who are the business organizations, the teams that actually own this information? Who's creating it? Second aspect then is understanding what are the drivers behind this? What are some of the regulations to think about? What are some of the business requirements to do so? What are the risks that are associated with that? And we're going to take a look at that not only from a cybersecurity perspective, but let's talk about things like operational risk, operational costs. From there, we'll start to talk about the different approaches for how do you start to define what's called a data disposition framework. What does this look like? What are the components of it? How do we start to identify differentiating between different lines of business that do create this information and what are their needs to keep it? Next, we'll look at developing the ideas and for consolidating and implementing controls to discover it, protect it, reduce it, destroy it. Again, very collaborative process here of working with the business and the data owners to ultimately keep what's important, get rid of the noise, reduce our risks, and still drive value to the business. So let's talk about thinking about your data footprints. And again, this is not a typographical error. There's multiple information types we collect as a business. It spans a number of different business needs, business units, operational requirements. And in most cases, when you think about it from your organization's perspective, this all doesn't sit underneath one stack. You have different lines of business, different departments doing their own thing, rightfully so. We try to keep information separated into silos and into containers, into buckets, because IT doesn't necessarily need to know all the nuances of what accounting does. Legal has a requirement to keep information protected. And as you can see, this is just an example of the multiple types of information an organization can have. Ergo, we have multiple footprints here. So as you're thinking about this from an operation and organization perspective, start to ask yourself the question, what are the types of information your company's collecting? Who's collecting it? What are they doing with it? Next one will be probably hit a little bit more closer to home to most people. You have multiple systems that are collecting information, using it, creating it, transmitting it, storing it, archiving it. The advances in technology, the advent of the cloud, has created a lot of systems that allows us to get information out there quickly, allows us to get the job done faster, allows us to develop the next generation of products and services, connect information with our partners in order to share and grow our business. That information will spread. Information is like water. You pour water on the floor, it's going to take the path that's the least of resistance and flow everywhere. Data is the same way. If we have interconnected systems, and we have all these things where it can flow back and forth, it's ultimately going to end up in spots where we may not want it. So from an operational standpoint and from a risk consideration, ask yourself the question, what are the systems that we are using in order to store, create, use, and destroy information? As you can see here, information system footprints, information type footprints. How do we start to wrap our head around controlling that, quantifying that, understanding what's important and what we need to keep? Well, we'll dive into the key reasons why we want to keep information. And we're going to start with the regulations. A lot of these we're going to start with that you know about. PCI is an industry standard. It has a requirement around being able to report on how many transactions you are keeping. There are requirements that you have to have this. No ifs, ands, or buts. If you're in the healthcare industry, which I spend a lot of time in, minimum retention time for access logs, medical records, et cetera, is 6 years. Sarbanes-Oxley, from a financial reporting perspective, is 7 years. These are requirements. If you do not have it from a regulatory perspective, you're out of compliance. That's going to get you audited. That's going to possibly result in regulatory fines, corrective action plans, et cetera. There's a lot more out there. Depending upon your business, you have different requirements. For example, if you are a retailer and you are selling tobacco products, you have to keep 3 years of transactions. They want to know where it's going. It's a restricted product. Retailers do sell firearms. 5 years to keep your license application to buy in a firearm, and if you sell it, you keep that data for 20 years. I have a friend of mine who works in this industry, and the worst thing he fears is losing one record because an ATF is asking him questions, and he could potentially go to jail. Not a fun spot to be in. The FDA is massive. Everything from food production, to medical devices, to pharmaceuticals, they have a number of regulations. Medical devices is one that I talk about quite a bit. Minimum retention time is 2 years from the time you produce it up to the commercial life of the product. Some of you are probably thinking, well, I don't make medical devices. If your wearable device that you make goes under FDA requirements and gets FDA approval, you have to keep that information for the life of the commercial life of the product. So it's a pretty complex industry. Again, us as cybersecurity professionals may not know what all of these are, but there are very specific reasons why organizations keep it. So as you ask yourself this question about looking at how do we protect it, it's important to understand what do you have to retain that's appropriate for the regulations and requirements that you have to abide by. Let's move into more of the business side of this. Why do businesses keep information? Well, executive leadership, boards of directors, product managers need to have information in order to make educated decisions and strategic decisions on where they want to go. I want to look at market conditions. I want to look at the demographics and who's buying what. I want to understand what's selling well, what's not selling. Where do I see future state growth? Not only from a product perspective, but I might be looking at a geographic region. That information is critical in order to make those decisions on how do we go to market? What are the next things we're going to do for the next 3 to 5 years? Where are we going to invest? That's critical because if the company's not making money, we don't grow. If we don't grow in a competitive economy, it makes it harder for us to move forward, hire more people, maintain profitability, and maintain the people we have on staff. There are business risk requirements around here that we have to consider as well. If we're under active investigation, you've probably all heard of the term legal hold. You don't get rid of that information until the legal hold's lifted. That could be decades. If I'm under an active investigation from a regulatory body like the FDA, who will come in and audit pharmaceutical companies, food producers, et cetera, that information is also being held by a regulatory agency. You can't get rid of it. And lastly, statutes of limitation. If you are dealing with a situation, there are certain times from a legal perspective that information has to be retained until the statutes of limitations run out. These are the things that businesses think about. These are things as cybersecurity professionals we might not have insight into. We need guidance and partnership with the business to understand what we need to keep and how we develop that market analysis, as well as what do we need to retain from a legal operations perspective. So thinking about this, what do we need to keep? Who are the people that are collecting it? What can we get rid of? What can we potentially anonymize in order to start controlling what that risk profile looks like? And how do we start to think about reducing that data footprint? Operationally, there's things we want to track as well. I work in the consulting industry. I need to make sure my people are utilized. That's incredibly important. I want to take a look at productivity. What are my production lines doing? How much efficiency do I have? How much waste do I have from a product perspective? I want to minimize the amount of waste so I reduce cost of goods sold. They monitor all this stuff. It's really important for them in order to be able to determine what's it truly cost me to make a product. How productive are my people? If you're dealing with contractual obligations, like you're a managed security service provider, you are a software as a service vendor. I'm providing power generators for backup for a hospital. Uptime and reliability is critical. I am contractually obligated to make sure I'm meeting my requirements. You might hear the term 5 nines or 6 nines. 99.99999% uptime. That means you can only be down for a few seconds a year. You have to be able to prove that contractually. Companies need that. Other things like purchase history, for those of you who have Amazon, you can see you've got a track record. Why? Part of it's because of warranties. You need to be able to get a refund. If there's a recall, they want to be able to track who has this product so you can get it back. Fraud prevention as well is a pretty key aspect. Businesses want to know if somebody's trying to take advantage of them, somebody's spoofing an account. So from that aspect, we take a look at it from the operations side. What's being collected? Who do we have to talk to in order to understand what are these operational pieces of information that they need to keep? And again, going back to that concept of what is important, what do we need to keep, what can we get rid of, what can we anonymize? Well, what are the risks? We all know the cloud's this magical spot and things are perfect and nothing gets stolen, right? Well, wrong. There's a lot of stuff that's going on out there. Regulations are huge. Privacy is first and foremost right now. For those of you who are not aware, there are now 5 US state privacy laws in effect. And there's probably going to be another 5 at the end of this year. I'm sorry, not at the end of this year, end of next year. That's changing the way we have to think about what we have to do from a business perspective. We have to understand that our clients and our customers are going to come and ask us, what do you have? What are you selling? Where is it? And get rid of it. And if I'm in one of those 5 states, and I'm doing business in one of those 5 states, regardless if I'm headquartered there or not, I have to get rid of it. I have to respond to that request. That takes time to respond to the request. That takes time to validate the information's there. It takes time to generate the report. It takes time to respond back. And it takes legal counsel and compliance time to be able to validate requests and to respond to auditors when they come in and say, did you do this correctly? You're going to notice a theme here in the next couple of slides. I'm talking about the amount of time to find your data, the amount of time to respond to it, the amount of time to deal with the auditors, and the amount of time to litigate and refute the findings. Second side of this we talked about is regulatory. For those of you who go through regulatory inspections, it's the same process. They're going to come in and say, you need to do X, whether you're working for a bank, whether you're working in food production, whether you are working in a pharmaceutical company, whether you're working in a hospital. I have to be able to respond to that request, produce the data, review the data and the audit findings, and have my legal counsel and compliance team have a very long and lengthy discussion about what is going on. Are these findings valid? How am I going to deal with the corrective action plan to resolve the findings from a regulatory audit? Lastly, audit requests. If I'm doing a financial audit, if I've got a contractor who's coming in and auditing my production services and asking how effective are you being, it's the same thing. I need to produce information, validate the findings, deal with the auditors, and have a very lengthy conversation with legal and compliance about what's valid, what are we going to fix, and how long is it going to take to fix it. Again, recurring theme. Time and resources, time to resolve, legal costs. Let's get into more esoteric, fun stuff. For those of you who've never heard of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, it is basically the set of policies that discuss how you deal with a court finding and filing in the United States. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I did not play one on television. I did not stay at a hotel and become an expert. I have worked with legal counsel. I have worked with compliance. We do talk about this, particularly from my days in data loss prevention. This was a very big concern. We'll start with Rule 26. Rule 26 is known as the duty to disclose. You get a subpoena. Your lawyers will debate what is in scope, how much it costs, what is considered undue burden, and then you've got to produce information. I've had the responsibility of responding to a subpoena in one of my roles, and you have to be very careful about what you do. You get the court order, you comply. Now, of course, this has been handled by legal before, and it's pretty well vetted by the time us as cybersecurity professionals or data owners get this. Now, that scope of what you have to comply with is governed by Rule 34. What is known as under the section of producing documents, you have to produce documents, data, email, etc., that is covered under your normal course of business. How many of you have never heard of a data retention policy? Everybody has. Awesome. That is how you determine what is your normal course of business. If my data retention policy says I only keep 2 years of email, perfect. You can ask me for 5 years of email, and I will tell you quite simply, nope, policy states I only keep 2, and I can demonstrate we destroy it after 2 years. That's the scope of your subpoena. This is where your data retention policy starts to become a risk mitigation factor. Now, let's say you don't have this documentation in place. Let's say you fail to comply. This is Rule 37. Failure to make disclosures or to cooperate in a discovery. The net out of this term is simply this. If you fail to comply, the court can instruct the jury to assume that you are, in fact, guilty of that particular action, charge, fact, whatever. That is a heavy implication. So by not being able to produce the information, by not having a data retention policy, by not being able to demonstrate that you have produced information under the normal course of due business, the court can say, you're it. You're guilty. Instruct the jury to find that. That's a pretty heavy consequence. That's something that we have to have a conversation with when we're dealing with our compatriots, our legal counsel, and talking about controlling risks, reducing data footprints. That, particularly for a US-based company, is the key piece of information to keep in mind. So as you're thinking about this, how prepared is your organization to retrieve this information? From an audit, from a regulatory inspection, from a subpoena. Let's talk about the operational costs here. We've talked about risk. We've talked about the concern of getting audited, dealing with a finding. Well, there's a cost to keeping information. Again, we all think storage is cheap. Storage is storage. Whether I'm storing that online, whether I'm storing that as a backup, it's a cost. We're dealing in times where we're trying to control our costs. We're dealing with the fact that we actually have to go through and now determine if this information is valid when we're backing it up. If I'm backing up petabytes of data, how long do you think it's going to take me to validate that backup's working? How much are we spending on backing up that data? How much do we really need to keep? What's important? It takes time, as we talked about, to go through and validate this information's there. It takes time to go through and determine where does this information really sit. Worst time to find out you don't have the right information backed up or stored or inventoried is when you have an outage. Outage can be a system goes down, a cloud service goes down, you get hit with ransomware, your data's gone. That's the wrong time to find out about it. And lastly, the more data we have, the more systems we have that are consuming information, creating information, means I've got a bigger threat profile. I have information everywhere. A colleague of mine made an interesting observation to me one day, and he said, Toby, your information is the edge of your business. It's no longer the cloud. It's no longer the firewalls, the remote worker. It's your information. It flows everywhere. You're sharing it. You're using it. It's the edge of your business. And the bigger that profile is, the more risk you're incurring from a cybersecurity perspective as well. So as you're thinking about this, ask that question. What's it really costing? Time, resources, systems, the security controls we have to put in place to control this and protect this massive ocean of information, it's pretty substantial. Speaking of oceans, let's talk about lakes, data lakes. They're fantastic. They offer a wealth of capabilities in order for us to allow to deal with and search through sensitive information, be able to get better analytics, be able to have a conversation and make decisions around where we want to go, what do we want to do. At a high level, I basically take information in from a multitude of sources, I ingest it, I normalize it, I put it into this, call it a data block, and throw it into the data lake. And then I run tools against it. I can get great analytics out of it, great graphs, and make a lot of fun decisions. There's a problem there. It is write once, read many. The moment I put it in that data lake, it's there. I just can't go in there and scrub it out because I've got multiple blocks with the same information in there. I have to pull this information out of the data lake. I have to scrub it, delete it, destroy it, whatever, put that information back in and re-ingest it. I was working with a company here in the Bay Area, 50 petabytes of personal information, 50 petabytes. This was 4 years ago. We were estimating that they took on 5,000 to 7,000 requests a year just for GDPR. It would probably cost them $10 million in compute power, compute time, to pull those data blocks out, scrub it, put it back in. That's a lot. We now have 5 additional state laws. We now have Canada with new laws for Canadian residents. We have Brazil, we have China. Privacy is becoming a big issue. That's just one example. If I'm doing clinical research, I have to get that information out of my data lake if I'm contractually obligated. The net is it's not easy and cheap to get it out of here once you put it in. We're going to come back to this later on when I start talking about thinking about disposing of this and protecting this in the future. The question to ask is how much sensitive data do you have in this type of repository for those of you who are working in data lakes? Probably most of us are. Well, great. It's not all doom and gloom. Look, honest, I promise you that. This is not the end of the world. We have to think about having a dialogue. How do we start to dispose of this? How do we have that conversation with our business to think about understanding what's important? What do we need to keep in an unfettered, unredacted state? What do we have to protect? What can we get rid of, and when can we get rid of it? So looking at it and going back on some of the topics we talked about, it's understanding those business requirements. What are you doing? Why do you need to keep it? What are the important things about that? Secondary aspect of this is understanding what are the regulatory components of this? Why do we need to keep it? What are the industry requirements? Again, PCI is an industry requirement. It's not a regulatory requirement. There's multiple state and local requirements you may have to comply with depending upon the industry you're in. Understanding the contractual side. What can I keep? What can I get rid of? Again, if I'm working as a contract research organization doing the next generation research on a drug, I may not be able to keep that information. I may be able to consume it, but at the end of the contract, I might have to get rid of it. And lastly, is understanding the operating requirements. Why do they want to keep it? Again, production line output, utilization, SLAs, all really key factors on what's making this information need to be kept and what organizations are doing with it. So how do we develop this framework? Again, those same themes. Who are the lines of business I have to talk to? Who are the people I need to partner up with to understand what am I doing? What are you doing? What are you collecting? Why do you do this? Understanding what the data elements are. This is key. We're going to start to break down that in terms of some common terms you might understand. First name, last name, address, etc. I've built frameworks out with 400 elements in it. Very large business. Multiple lines of operations, things around warranties and purchases and tracking histories, access into the building. Pretty key things that the business needs to keep from an operations perspective, which ties into why do we need to keep it? How long do you need to keep it? At what state do I need to keep this information, and what state can I start to transition it? And then lastly, how do we protect and anonymize it? We're going to look beyond just simple encryption. How can we use things like generalization, anonymization, and tokenization in order to protect this information? And then lastly, when can we get rid of it? What's the company say we can do to get rid of it, and what timing? What's the business say we can do with it? And this is what a data disposition framework looks like, as an example. I started talking about the data elements. What are they? Again, this is a very small list for a very small use case. This can get pretty extensive. Take this in bite-sized chunks when you start to build one of these. Start with your most important business units. Start to understand what these are, and understand this is going to probably grow. These are not database fields. These are the names of the elements. We start to identify and categorize, what is this? Is it PII information? Is it sales? Is it research? What have you? Use that to start to put the context around who owns it, what are they doing with it. And then start to work with your data governance organization to understand what's the classification behind it. Can it be shared? Is it sensitive? What sensitivity level does it have? From there, we start to talk about what these different lines of businesses are. These are just some examples. And if I'm looking at the different requirements between, let's say, for fraud prevention versus marketing, you can see same time periods, I have different requirements. I'm going to protect my information in years 1, years 3 for fraud prevention perspectives. And greater than 3 years, we'll destroy it. We don't need it. It's no longer required. Marketing, as an example, I may start in the year 1 just keeping and protecting it, but you notice down here we're starting to make decisions on, do I need to keep it any longer? Do I need to keep my credit card data, for example? Can I destroy it? As I start to get more into the analytics side, I can transition this information over. I can start to destroy it. I can start to anonymize it, generalize it. I want to be able to run analytics. I want to be able to do stuff with the information to make decisions, but I don't need it in an unencrypted, unprotected format. This is an example, but this is how you start. This is how you put the stake in the ground to say, this is what we're going to do going forward, and work with the business to start to build this out. So we started talking about understanding what is that disposition. When can we keep it? When do we dispose of it? When do we encrypt it, et cetera. Now let's start talking about reducing the footprint. What are the things to think about here? When we look at it from a consolidation perspective, we have information everywhere. Again, business dialogue. We started talking about what kind of information you have. Now let's start to talk about the business. Start to talk to the business about where is this information supposed to be. If you're just going to go use data discovery tools and go crawl petabytes of information, it's an effort and futility. It'll take you forever. You need to talk to the people who are the trusted owners of this data. They should have an idea of where this information should be. Will it be there all the time? Who knows? In my experience, you tend to find out it's more of this case where it goes from here, trusted repository, to here. Why? Well, we talked about it. We've got interconnected systems. Data can move everywhere. People are sharing information everywhere. We can start to leverage some of these tools like data discovery tools, data loss prevention tools, what have you, to be able then to go out and say, if I know my sensitive information should be here, I can use things like digital fingerprints, regex, et cetera, and start to look for information where it shouldn't be. File repositories, databases, applications, et cetera. In some aspects, in the unstructured space, I can actually take this information and pull it back. I can use the tools to automate the controls and pull information back. Now notice I'm not saying destroy it. Pull it back in the quarantine, leave a note out here in this file repository saying, hey, if you're looking for this information, we took it. It's back here. Contact these folks. It's one way of being able to reduce that data footprint because this does happen. It'll end up on Teams, it'll end up in SharePoint, it'll end up on OneDrive. Probably doesn't need to be there. You can leverage your tools to pull it back in. From the structured data repository side, you're going to start to identify where the applications are. What applications are out there that are actually keeping this information, storing it, creating it? Part of this conversation, again, at the top level, is being able to talk to the business and say, should it be here? Is this allowed? If it is, document it. That unstructured, that unknown repository now goes into this list. This is how you start to use technology and that relationship with your business to start to reduce your digital asset footprint, reduce the number of systems that are sharing this, understand what the workflows are, and to be able to put controls around it. The question to ask yourself is, how can you assist? We as cybersecurity professionals have to be a partner here. We have to help them, our business colleagues, understand how we can help them enable the business to do this, and at the same time help them manage the risk for the organization. From the protection side, you heard me talk about a couple of these methodologies. I'm going to talk about this pretty quickly. Encryption, first of all, is pretty straightforward. I scramble the data. I'm using symmetric, asymmetric, and asymmetric keys to make the data unreadable. It's a gigantic pile of data, numbers, characters, what have you. Pretty much can't read unless you have the key to unlock it. Secondary approach is, and some of you are probably familiar, but it's called masking. I can hide most of the data within an application. You get asked about your last four of your social security number, your credit card number. They're typically using this approach because your customer service rep probably doesn't have access to the full list of data. Tokenization is an interesting one. It's a way of being able to render information in a format that's consistent with what it's typically looks like, so you don't break your application, so credit card numbers, social security numbers, account numbers, and at the same time, it's unreadable. That could be one way, where the data is never recoverable, or you can use bidirectional tokenization in order to recover the information if you have the right permissions. More broadly, and as an advent of HIPAA requirements as well as GDPR, this topic of anonymization, pseudonymization. It's basically replacing information with false information. I replace my name, Toby, with the name Patrick. You can't trace that back. It's one way, you're overwriting it. It's there for an analytics purpose. It's there to anonymize data and protect the person or the entity that you are looking to adhere to from a requirements perspective. Generalization, for those of you who have ever read census data, talks about taking information and making it into bigger ranges. Instead of me living in Denver, I now live in Denver Metro. I go from 500,000 people to 6 million people very quickly. These are all tactics and approaches for being able to make this information usable from an analytics perspective and at the same time reducing your risk. So from an encryption perspective, what are some of the things you think about? We'll start with the left side here and talk about files and folders and databases. Classic approach. I want to scramble the information to make sure I need a key to unlock it. It's there primarily to prevent theft. It's there to restrict access. Somebody dumps my database, it's encrypted, good luck. Not very effective from when I've got the database and the application online. It does work. It does prevent that whole database from being exported unless it's online and somebody's able to do an actual dump of it, which is where we move into the other side. Using things like database column encryption does a couple things. One, I'm now able to focus on what's important. What do I need to protect in that column? Where I'm going to typically use something like a tokenization approach or a masking approach in order to make the information unreadable unless I have the actual permissions to pull that key back and unlock it. And then lastly, looking at this from the application level. This is what a lot of organizations are starting to look at now. How am I able to put encryption at the application layer so when I pull out as data cell, looking at an application, I can scramble that based upon who's reading the information. It's protected the database. I pull it up into the app. It's still protected there. And then based upon my permissions, I can actually unlock my data. So we've talked about encryption approaches. We've talked about encryption methodologies in terms of where we can do the encryption. And these are pretty powerful controls that an organization can use in order to start to protect this information based upon where we use it, how we're transporting it, where we're storing it. So consider this. Which one of these would be appropriate for what you're doing within your operations, within your organization? And how do you have that dialogue with your business to determine which one of these will work? Let's go back to this. We can use that same type of approach here in order to protect information going into a data lake. I'm going to start here on this side because this is where we hit the problem. The problem still persists here. In order for me to take information that's already in a data lake and do something with it, I have to extract it, modify it here, put it back in. Now, I have the ability here, instead of just wiping the whole record out, I can now anonymize it. I can now encrypt it. I can now scramble it and put it back into the data lake. When organizations are dealing with it, they typically look at it from two vectors, what we call the post-processing side here, then looking at it from this pre-processing side. If I am encrypting my information out here, and I'm ingesting it encrypted, it's going to go in here. And then when I'm talking in term encrypted, it's going to be anonymized, generalized, what have you. Secondary aspect is the moment I take it into this stage of my ingestion, I can put actions here. So upon ingestion into the data lake, I am anonymizing, generalizing, or encrypting information. Goes into the data lake, it's there for use, it's there for consumption, and it's protected. I don't have to pull it back out. Most organizations are going to have to do a combination of this if you have a data lake up and running already. It provides a lot of options in order to be able to get this in a usable state and start to minimize the risks. This takes time. Organizations have to plan this out, and the same organization I was talking about that had 50 petabytes of data was looking at this, discovering where it was, encrypting it post-production, and then looking at it from the ingestion layer. Lastly, destroying information. I'm ex-military. I had a nice big paper shredder on the ship that would pulverize a document in the powder. That's great. Can't do that here. This is digital. This is tough. There are approaches to doing this. There are approaches to destroying information, making it unreadable at such a state where it's going to take a whole lot more effort to decrypt it or unscramble it than it's worth. We're talking about doing multi-pass overwrite with random data in ones and zeros. There are approaches of doing actual overwrites with multiple encryption passes, 20, 30 encryption keys. And every time you encrypt, take the key, throw it out. Next key, throw it out. Next key, throw it out. It's pretty difficult to decrypt it when you've used 30 keys to unlock it. And these standards are not just something that somebody made up. There are a lot of government standards here, from the DoD to the UK's His Majesty's government to the German Society of Governance Body for Information Security. So when you're looking at this from the information protection perspective, there are multiple ways of being able to digitally destroy information once it comes to end of life. We as cybersecurity professionals have these methodologies at our disposal, commercial software out there, as well as you can write programs to do it. So there is a way of destroying information. Great. So what did you learn today? What to think about? What are the next steps here? So as you walk out of this, I mean, obviously there's a lot of information here. Again, grab the slides. Have this there as a reference material. And start to identify, who do you want to go to first? How do you want to start this dialogue? What are some of the things to ask? Understand the business. Be a business partner. Have a conversation with them to understand, what do they need to keep? Why do they need to keep it? What are the drivers behind it? Next 2 to 3 months, start to take a look at the infrastructure. Where's this information going? Why is it there? Where are we replicating data for our partners? How do we start to put that framework into place to understand what information we're keeping and what's the infrastructure that's keeping it, storing it, creating it? Lastly, as we take this journey forward, next 6 months or so, how do we develop the disposition framework? How do we have that dialogue with our compliance legal department? How do we start to build this out in order to start to take tangible steps towards reducing our data footprints, reducing the information we have, the infrastructure that has it, and the need to keep it, understand what's the justification behind it. So what do we learn? There's lots of information out there. There's lots of types of information. There's a lot of systems out there that make up our footprints. There's a lot of reasons why organizations need to keep it. Business justification, regulatory requirements, and there's a lot of risk behind it. There's a lot of cost behind it. I think one of the key points from takeaway from this is that cost aspect. Have that cost dialogue with your business. Understand that it's not just cybersecurity risk. There are operational costs. There's people, there's time, there's resources. And that's substantial. That's tangible. It's manageable. We have the ability to start to put a control order structure in place to start to understand, what do we need to keep from a data elements perspective? What can we keep? What can we destroy? Start to build out a plan to help them do that. Manage it. Start to pull the information back into a better structured organization, structured data repository management system. And keeping that under control, it's a pretty daunting task at times. Take it in small chunks. Start your process slowly. And then lastly, leverage your tools and capabilities. How do we encrypt it? How can we discover it? How can we automate the redaction and removal of it? And work with the business in order to start to take this and put this into a tangible plan. This is iterative. This will take time. This will take partnership with the business. But if you're a good business partner and you're able to help them understand what their risks are, understand what the value of the information is, you can come up with a pretty manageable plan in order to start to reduce your data footprints, start to control the risks by reducing the amount of information you have and the amount of systems that are storing and using, creating information. What questions do you have? Comments? Thoughts? Yes, ma'am. Take your time.
My name is Lucy Thompson. I'm the Consumer Privacy Ombudsman in a lot of bankruptcy sales. So I've seen many companies and looked at their data. And a lot of these companies are just buying as much data from data brokers as possible. And the data brokers are doing exactly the opposite of what you're saying. So is there anything that can be done about the data brokers? And then I've heard from people who are in AI world that you shouldn't be destroying data because we're going to need it. The more we have, the better. So what would you say to those people?
Okay, so first part, consumer products, so the data brokers. Yes, they're in the business of making money by selling information. And for those of us who go to get those great apps that say, hey, you'll get free money for whatever, yeah, they're selling your data. You're opting in. So the data brokers are going to ultimately be held accountable underneath the privacy laws because regardless of where they sit, the consumer is starting to get that right back in their hands. They will have to comply or they will have to face, litigation over it. It's going to take time. GDPR has been out now for quite a while. CCPA has been out for 6 years at least. It's going to take time, and it's going to take time for them to get that back. Now, artificial intelligence, interesting topic. And I was actually involved in an AI discussion last week at the Health Information Management Systems Conference. There are great innovations that are going to come up with AI. There are also ethical concerns around what AI can do. Because the moment I tell AI something, it's now out. So the organizations that are starting to use artificial intelligence, quantum computing, machine learning, have to take that into consideration. The moment I put that into one of those engines, I have to think about how can I remove it? Can I remove it? And it's a challenge. They are dealing with it. I believe that the European compliance agency is actually looking at putting certain controls around artificial intelligence. This was as of a couple of years ago. It's a challenge, and organizations looking at it from a compliance and risk perspective. What other questions?
So that's a convenient segue because I've been in the intersection of healthcare and ML for almost 10 years now. Have you seen anyone attempting to use technologies like deterministic or homomorphic encryption as a way to get around some of these issues? Because the training data, of course, is extremely valuable. And if you have seen anyone try that, did they have any sort of success in doing so?
I can't think of any particular examples around those encryption types to get around the requirements and get around some of the risks around data anonymization, data protection. One of the interesting topics that's coming up is quantum. How are we dealing with quantum? Now, there are algorithms that are coming out to address it. This is starting to define some standards, and Germany's got some out as well. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but let's definitely connect offline. I'll see if I can pull up some information from some of my other colleagues. Any other questions?
So you mentioned the difficulty of trying to parse through unstructured data to identify what is sitting out in those silos. Is there any category of tool or software set that I could go and research to see what's in that space and what's effective at? Because sometimes trying to find terms to go search for even to identify the niche of software you need is difficult.
Yep. So yes, there are a number of different types of tools out there and some of the approaches they will use in order to help you better discover it. I talked about the fingerprinting of it. I can leverage some of the things, the terms are like exact data matching, where I can actually fingerprint the database. It creates an actual digital hash of those values. And I can use that then to go out and speed up and get better accuracy around the detection of content. There are things around the unstructured data space where I can actually take that known data repository of flat files, as we would call them, so whether that's Word documents, PDFs, et cetera, Excel spreadsheets, do the same type of fingerprinting.
I understand the concept of it, but as far as like there's mobile device management, is there a category of product out there, that I should go research that category?
Yep. They're typically called data loss prevention, data discovery. Connect with me after the conference. I can point you to probably 10, 15 vendors out here at the conference today and show you, go talk to these folks.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to help out. This is the space I work in. I work with a lot of these tools.
Hi there. Whoa. So I work for a small company that's owned by a holding company. And we don't have our own legal department. We don't have a risk officer. And believe it or not, I don't think that the parent company has a risk officer or office either. So who gets to decide how long data is kept? Things like email. I mean, the sales department wants every email that's ever been sent to them, you know, and marketing. And I'm just not really sure. I understand, you know, and I can speak to some of the risks, but it's unclear to me who gets to make this policy.
Sure.
And who normally does.
So typically, it's going to be your executive stack who's going to make that policy. Obviously, you're in a situation where you may not have an assigned risk officer or legal counsel. I think in some capacity, most organizations will have a general counsel assigned at some location. Obviously, you need general counsel in order to write contracts and deal with compliance issues. I would certainly start with legal first. I would understand from a risk perspective, what are some of the things that the business is working. So depending upon your industry, you may have some type of person who's overseeing the compliance side of it. Certainly from an accounting perspective, I would talk with your accounting professionals because there are records you have to keep. Happy to talk with you a little bit more offline and get a little bit more into nuances of what your business is and provide you some further insights there as well. Any other questions?
Hi, my name's Hal Katz, and I work for a casualty and property company. Just wanted to know what your thoughts were on areas where your data is being stored, transmitted, or processed by third parties, and typically the controls that you might have over that is, do they have breach control policies in place, or maybe DLP policies, or or the other fallback is contract litigation. Is there anything else to deal with this area?
Sure. Oftentimes when you're engaging with a third party, it really does come down to how you negotiate that service agreement with them. Who is accountable for what? When I was serving as the information security officer for a healthcare company that did software, I was signing business associate agreements that clearly outlined who was accountable for what from a HIPAA perspective. So you can put those terms in place. You can really identify who is accountable for it. I was actually dealing with an entertainment company, this was probably 10 years ago, that had a third party that they ended their business with 3 years prior. And lo and behold, a year later, they got breached and still had that company's data. They were contractually obligated to get rid of it. So you have to put those terms in there to say at termination, you have to do X. You have to put those terms in there to say you have to protect it in accordance with these things. You can enforce those controls. And if they are not in compliance with those controls and they have an incident, that's going to make them accountable. Any other questions? How much time do we have left, by the way? 4 minutes. Any other questions, comments, or thoughts? Well, awesome. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming out. Again, these slides are available. I'm going to be here for the rest of the week out at the Optiv booth. If you've got any questions, you also have my contact details from RSA. Thank you again. Hope you found this conversation enjoyable. Thank you.